Choice A, Iron Man helps Hulk. The streets of Harlem erupted into chaos as Abomination, the grotesque product of Emil Blonsky's experimentations with gamma radiation, rampaged through the city. Cars crumpled under his massive fists, buildings cracked and crumbled from his reckless destruction, and panicked civilians fled in every direction. The military, powerless against the creature's overwhelming strength, struggled to maintain order as the situation spiraled further out of control. High above, in the heart of Stark Industries' Manhattan branch, Tony Stark was deeply engrossed in a project. The faint glow of his arc reactor illuminated the otherwise dimly lit workshop as he fine-tuned the prototype of a new suit. JARVIS's voice broke the silence. "Sir, there is a situation in Harlem. I've detected elevated gamma radiation levels and seismic activity consistent with a high-powered skirmish." Tony frowned, wiping his hands on a nearby cloth. "Gamma radiation. Don't tell me Banner's in trouble again." Jarvis continued. "The news feeds confirm it, sir. The Hulk is currently engaged in combat with an unknown adversary. The destruction is extensive, and casualties are mounting." Tony stared at the monitor, watching the live footage of Hulk battling Abomination. The two titans exchanged devastating blows, their fight carving a path of devastation through the city. Stark's mind raced. The Avengers initiative was still in its infancy, and he hadn't officially met Banner yet, but if this wasn't contained, it could spell disaster. "All right," Tony said, striding toward the suit station. "Looks like it's time to play Good Samaritan. Jarvis, prep the Hulkbuster prototype." "Sir," the AI responded, "the Hulkbuster is still in its testing phase. Its systems are unrefined and..." Tony cut him off with a smirk. "Unrefined is still better than nothing. Besides, I'm a fan of trial by fire." The armor assembly process began, and Tony stepped into the suit's chest cavity as metal plates locked into place. Unlike his sleeker Iron Man suits, this one was bulkier, built for brute force rather than agility. The reinforced exoskeleton hummed to life, and Tony couldn't resist a quip. "Let's see if I can keep the big guy from smashing me like a tin can." The thrusters engaged, and the massive suit lifted off, heading toward Harlem. On the streets, the battle between Hulk and Abomination intensified. Hulk roared in frustration as Abomination lifted a city bus and hurled it toward a group of fleeing civilians. With a leap, Hulk intercepted the bus, shielding the people with his massive frame, but Abomination took advantage of the moment, slamming into Hulk and sending him crashing through a building. Above the carnage, Tony arrived, his suit landing with a thunderous crash that sent shockwaves through the ground. Civilians paused to look up at the towering figure, hope flickering in their eyes. Hulk staggered to his feet, his eyes narrowing at the sight of the Hulkbuster. A guttural growl escaped his throat, and he pounded his fists together, ready to attack. Tony raised both hands in a defensive gesture. "Whoa, big guy, not here to fight you," he said through the external speakers. "Focus on the other guy." Abomination, seeing the new arrival, roared with savage delight and charged towards Stark. "All right, let's see what you've got," Tony muttered, engaging the suit's systems. The clash between Abomination and the Hulkbuster began with an earth-shaking collision. Stark used the suit's grappling claws to lock Abomination in place, firing a concentrated repulsor blast at point-blank range. The attack staggered the creature, but he retaliated with a vicious swipe, denting the suit's armor. Hulk watched the exchange, momentarily stunned. He then roared and joined the fight, barreling into Abomination and tackling him to the ground. The two titans grappled as Tony provided cover fire, using missiles and sonic disruptors to disorient the monstrous foe. "Hey, green guy," Tony quipped, dodging a stray swing from Abomination. "Let's make a deal. You smash, I blast." Hulk didn't respond with words, but seemed to understand, directing his fury at Abomination, while Stark worked to exploit openings in the creature's defense. As the battle raged, General Ross and his forces observed from a distance, their frustration growing. "Stark's interference isn't authorized," Ross barked, slamming his fist on the hood of a Humvee. An officer hesitated. "Sir, he's helping contain the situation." "Contain it?" Ross spat. "He's a wild card. We need to neutralize all three of them." Back in the fray, the unlikely team-up between Hulk and Iron Man began to turn the tide. Abomination, while powerful, was outmatched by their combined assault. Stark's tech distracted and weakened the beast, allowing Hulk to deliver devastating blows. The final moments of the battle were brutal. As Abomination attempted one last charge, Stark activated a kinetic pulse that sent the creature reeling. Hulk seized the opportunity, leaping high into the air and slamming both fists into Abomination's chest. The impact created a crater in the street, leaving Abomination unconscious at the center. Stark landed beside Hulk, his suit battered but functional. He raised his visor, revealing a triumphant grin. "Not bad for a guy in a tin can, huh?" Hulk glared at him but didn't attack, his breathing heavy from the fight. Tony took it as a win. "All right, big guy. Let's call it a day before Ross and his goons decide to ruin the fun." As military vehicles approached, Stark stepped between them and Hulk. "I've got this," he said to Ross, holding up a hand. "We'll handle the cleanup." Ross reluctantly stood down, and Stark turned to Hulk. "You've got options, Banner. Let's talk." In the aftermath of the Battle of Harlem, the streets were littered with debris, and emergency services worked tirelessly to help civilians. Abomination was secured by Ross's team, loaded into a reinforced transport. Tony Stark watched as the unconscious behemoth was hauled away, shaking his head. "Big guy," Tony said, addressing Hulk, who stood silently in the shadows of a ruined building. "We need to have a little chat before Ross decides you're next." Hulk growled low, his muscles still tense from the fight. Stark raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Easy there, Shrek. I'm not here to pick a fight. Let's talk about the whole you smashing everything in sight thing." Bruce Banner's voice, quieter and more strained, finally emerged from Hulk's imposing form. "Why should I trust you?" Tony's face softened. "Because I know what it's like to be the guy everyone wants to control. You're not the monster they think you are, Banner, and I think you know that too." As the sun began to rise over the wreckage, Hulk began to shrink, his green skin fading to reveal a weary and battered Bruce. Stark offered him a bottle of water from a compartment in the Hulkbuster's armor. "Thanks," Bruce muttered, taking a cautious sip. His eyes darted toward Ross's convoy in the distance. "What now?" Tony grinned. "Now you come with me. I've got a lab, equipment, and a knack for figuring out impossible problems. Maybe we can figure out how to keep the big guy under control without wrecking the city every time." Bruce hesitated. "And if I don't?" Tony tilted his head, his smile fading slightly. "If you don't, Ross and his goons are going to keep hunting you. And the next time, you might not get a choice." Later at Stark Industries, Bruce found himself in Tony's state-of-the-art lab. Holographic projections of gamma signatures and Hulk's biological structure floated in the air as Tony worked, flipping through data with practiced ease. Bruce sat at a workstation, studying the readings. You weren't kidding about having resources, Bruce admitted, impressed despite himself. I try, Tony said, tapping on a console. So, you want to tell me how you ended up in the middle of a monster wrestling match in Harlem? Bruce hesitated but decided to trust Tony. He explained the events leading up to the battle, the experiment gone wrong, his time on the run, and Blonsky's transformation into Abomination. Tony listened intently, occasionally interjecting with technical questions. So you're saying the gamma radiation not only didn't kill you, but turned you into, well, that fascinating. Fascinating isn't the word I'd use, Bruce said dryly. It's a curse. Tony frowned. Maybe, but every curse has a loophole. We just have to find it. As the two worked together, a bond began to form. Tony's curiosity and wit balanced Bruce's cautious, methodical approach. For the first time in years, Bruce felt a glimmer of hope that he might regain some control over his life. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit office, Justin Hammer, CEO of Hammer Industries, watched footage of the Harlem battle. His eyes gleamed with ambition as he studied the Hulk and the Hulkbuster suit. Impressive, isn't it? Said a voice behind him. Hammer turned to see General Ross entering the room. Ross had a file under his arm and a grim expression. "What can I do for the military today, General?" Hammer asked, his tone eager. Ross placed the file on the table. Inside were schematics of Abomination and notes on gamma radiation. "I need a weapon to counter the Hulk. Stark's got his toys, but I need someone willing to take risks." Hammer's grin widened. "General, you've come to the right place." Ross nodded. "We'll also need to retrieve Abomination. He could be useful." The two men began to plot, unaware that their machinations would soon draw Stark and Banner back into the fray. Back at Stark Industries, Tony and Bruce were making progress. Using data from the Hulkbuster and Banner's own research, they developed a prototype device designed to suppress gamma surges and potentially help Bruce retain his human form during transformations. Tony held up the small, sleek device. "You're looking at the future of anger management. Well, hopefully." Bruce examined it, skeptical. "You're sure this won't make things worse?" Tony smirked. "Trust me, I'm a genius." Before Bruce could respond, JARVIS's voice interrupted. "Sir, I'm detecting unauthorized access to military transport logs. Abomination is being relocated under suspicious circumstances." Tony's expression darkened. "Hammer, that snake, what's he up to?" Bruce stood. "If they're moving Abomination, it's not for something good." Tony nodded. "Looks like we've got some field work to do. You up for it?" Bruce hesitated, but then nodded. "Let's go." The jet carrying Tony Stark and Bruce Banner streaked across the night sky, heading toward a classified Hammer Industries facility located on the outskirts of New York. Tony piloted the jet himself, the Iron Man suit ready for action in the cargo hold. Bruce, sitting nearby, studied a tablet displaying a map of the facility. So, Bruce began, breaking the tense silence. What exactly is Hammer planning to do with Abomination? The last time anyone tried to control something like him, it didn't end well. Tony adjusted a lever, glancing at Bruce. Knowing Hammer, it's about ego. He wants to one-up me. And General Ross, he's looking for a way to weaponize everything he touches. The two of them together, that's a recipe for disaster. As they neared the facility, Jarvis interrupted. "Sir, the facility is heavily fortified with automated defenses. It appears Hammer anticipated the possibility of intruders." Tony grinned. "Good. Let's make this interesting. Jarvis, activate stealth mode." The jet's exterior shimmered, blending into the night as it approached the facility. The duo landed a safe distance away and prepared to infiltrate. Inside the Hammer Industries facility, Justin Hammer stood before a massive containment unit, housing the sedated Abomination. Engineers swarmed the room, installing restraints and monitoring the creature's vitals. General Ross observed from a control booth, his arms crossed. Hammer, Jantsuo gesturing toward the containment unit, addressed Ross. Once we stabilize his neural activity, we can deploy him as a tactical weapon. Controlled chaos, just like you wanted. Ross narrowed his eyes. He's not a toy, Hammer. This thing is a liability. Hammer smirked. Only if you don't know how to use it. Trust me, General. Once we've perfected this, you'll have the ultimate deterrent. Unbeknownst to the two men, Stark and Banner had infiltrated the facility. Tony, clad in his Iron Man suit, hovered silently over the perimeter, scanning for Abomination's location. Bruce stayed on the ground, using a cloaking device Stark had provided to avoid detection. Found him, Tony whispered over the comms. Big guy's in a containment chamber. Looks like Hammer's up to his usual idiocy. Let's just get in, disable him, and leave before Ross sends the cavalry, Bruce replied. Tony landed near a side entrance, disabling the security cameras with a well-placed EMP pulse. Bruce slipped inside, the gamma suppression device in hand. The two moved toward the containment chamber, avoiding guards and automated defenses. As they reached the chamber, alarms blared. Hammer's voice echoed through the facility. Well, looks like Stark couldn't resist crashing the party. Hammer activated the facility's automated defenses. Turrets sprang to life, firing at Tony, who engaged his suit's countermeasures. Missiles and repulsor blasts filled the air as Tony returned fire, creating a diversion for Bruce to reach the containment unit. Inside the chamber, Bruce faced Abomination's monstrous form. The creature was stirring, its restraints creaking under its strength. Bruce hesitated, memories of their last battle flashing through his mind. But he steeled himself and approached the console, attaching the gamma suppression device. Hammer, watching from the control booth, realized what was happening. No, you don't get to ruin my masterpiece, Banner. He slammed a button, releasing Abomination from his restraints. The beast roared, shaking the chamber as it lunged at Bruce. Tony burst through the wall, tackling Abomination mid-charge. The two titans collided, sending shockwaves through the facility. Abomination snarled, swiping at Tony, who used the Hulkbuster's grappling claws to hold him at bay. Banner, Tony shouted, dodging a punch. Anytime you want to join the fight, feel free. Bruce clenched his fists, the familiar green glow enveloping him. Moments later, the Hulk emerged, roaring as he charged at Abomination. The two gamma giants clashed, their blows shaking the very foundation of the facility. Tony circled the fight, using the Hulkbuster's weapons to weaken Abomination. Alright, team effort. Hulk smashes, I blast. Let's wrap this up before Ross gets here. Meanwhile, Ross and his forces closed in on the facility. Helicopters circled overhead as soldiers prepared to storm the building. Ross barked orders, determined to recapture both Abomination and Hulk. Inside, the battle raged on. Abomination gained the upper hand, slamming Hulk into a wall and pinning him down. Tony fired a concentrated repulsor beam, staggering the beast and giving Hulk a chance to recover. Bruce, regaining some control over Hulk's actions, activated the gamma suppression device remotely. The device emitted a high-pitched frequency, causing Abomination to howl in pain as his movements slowed. Tony seized the opportunity, unleashing a barrage of missiles that further weakened the creature. Hulk delivered the final blow, a thunderous punch that sent Abomination crashing to the ground, unconscious. As the dust settled, Tony and Hulk stood over the defeated Abomination. "Not bad for a couple of misfits," Tony quipped, breathing heavily. Before they could celebrate, Ross's forces stormed the facility. "You've got about 30 seconds before we're surrounded," Tony said, glancing at Hulk. Bruce transformed back, exhausted but relieved. "What now?" Tony activated the Hulkbuster's thrusters. "We're getting out of here. Grab on." Tony Stark and Bruce Banner soared through the night sky in the Hulkbuster suit. The jet destroyed in the chaos at Hammer Industries. Ross's helicopters pursued them relentlessly, searchlights illuminating the terrain below. Tony's voice crackled through the comms. "Banner, this is not how I envisioned spending my evening." Bruce clung tightly to the Hulkbuster, looking over his shoulder at their pursuers. "You didn't exactly give me a lot of options." "Relax," Tony quipped. "They're not gonna shoot at their precious Hulkbuster. It's me after all." Meanwhile, back at the Hammer Industries facility, Justin Hammer sat in a secure room, fuming. Ross, storming into the room, slammed his fist on the console. "You let them escape with Abomination neutralized. Do you realize what you've cost me?" Hammer, feigning calm, leaned back in his chair. "General, you should be thanking me. I gave you the means to control the Hulk, and you let Stark ruin it." Ross glared at him. "We're not finished, Hammer. You better hope I don't lose my grip on this situation." As Ross left, Hammer smirked. He wasn't about to let his plans unravel entirely. Picking up his phone, he made a call. "It's me. Activate Project Titan. We've still got one ace left to play." Back at Stark Industries, Tony and Bruce regrouped. Bruce, visibly shaken, slumped into a chair in the lab, while Tony adjusted his suit. Jarvis spoke up. "Sir, I've intercepted communications suggesting that Justin Hammer has initiated a backup plan involving a previously unknown project." Tony frowned, pacing the room. "Great. What now? Let me guess. A bigger, uglier version of Abomination." Bruce stood, a sense of dread washing over him. If Hammer's working with gamma radiation, it could be catastrophic. We need to stop him before he can deploy whatever this is. "Agreed," Tony said. "But first, let's deal with our friends in green." The two turned to the lab's large monitor, displaying live footage of Ross's forces mobilizing outside Stark Tower. Tanks and heavily armed soldiers surrounded the perimeter, demanding Hulk's surrender. As dawn broke, Tony and Bruce stepped onto the rooftop to face Ross. Tony, wearing a modified version of his Iron Man suit, raised his hands in a show of peace. "General Ross," Tony called out, his voice amplified. "Let's have a civil conversation before you start breaking my toys." Ross, standing in a command vehicle, barked through a megaphone. "Stark, you're harboring a fugitive. Turn Banner over or we'll take him by force." Bruce, standing behind Tony, muttered, "He's not going to listen." Tony smirked. "Good thing I don't play fair." Suddenly, the sky lit up as drones emerged from Stark Tower, forming a defensive perimeter. "Ross," Tony continued, "you fire one shot and I turn this into a very expensive day for you." Ross hesitated, weighing his options. Before he could respond, an explosion rocked the area. A massive mechanical figure emerged from the smoke. Project Titan. Standing nearly as tall as Hulk, the machine was powered by a mix of gamma radiation and Hammer's proprietary tech. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Tony said, activating his suit. The mechanical monstrosity turned its sights on the Hulk. Bruce, seeing no other option, transformed. The two Titans charged at each other, their clash sending shockwaves through the city. The battle raged on, with Hulk and Titan exchanging devastating blows. Tony provided support from the air, using his repulsors to target the machine's weak points. Ross's forces held back, unwilling to risk collateral damage. Inside the lab, Jarvis alerted Tony to a critical flaw in Titan's design. "Sir, the gamma core powering the machine is unstable. If it overloads, the resulting explosion could level the city." "Of course it could," Tony muttered, dodging a blast from Titan's energy cannon. "Banner, we need to disable the core." Hulk, locked in combat with Titan, growled in response. "Working on it." Tony devised a plan, instructing Jarvis to reroute power from the Hulkbuster suit into a single EMP pulse. As the battle reached its peak, Tony flew directly into the machine's chest, releasing the pulse. The core sputtered and the machine faltered. Hulk seized the moment, ripping the core from Titan's chest and hurling it into the air. Tony, acting quickly, launched a missile, detonating the core safely above the city. As the dust settled, Ross's forces moved in. Hulk, exhausted, stood over the remains of Titan. Tony landed beside him, his suit battered but functional. Ross approached, flanked by soldiers. "This isn't over, Stark." Tony held up a hand. "Actually, it is. You just saw what happens when you mess with gamma radiation. You want more of this on your hands." Ross hesitated, but ultimately signaled his men to stand down. "We'll be watching you." As the soldiers withdrew, Tony turned to Bruce. "Well, that was fun. Now how about we work on making sure none of this ever happens again?" Bruce managed a tired smile. "I'd like that." Choice B. Savage Hulk. The streets of Harlem are engulfed in chaos as the Hulk battles Abomination in a fight that shakes the city to its foundations. Abomination, larger and more aggressive, hurls cars and demolishes buildings in an attempt to overpower Hulk. Civilians scream as they flee the destruction, their terror echoing through the night. Police and first responders do their best to evacuate the area, but the two titans clash leaves devastation in its wake. From a nearby rooftop, Betty Ross watches the battle unfold, her face pale with fear. She calls out to Bruce, hoping her voice will reach the man she loves buried within the Hulk's rage. General Thunderbolt Ross, standing beside her with binoculars, grits his teeth as he orders his men to hold their positions. "This is worse than I anticipated," Ross mutters. His frustration grows as he watches Hulk, who seems to be matching Abomination blow for blow, but with increasing ferocity. Despite his rage, Bruce Banner's consciousness flickers within the Hulk, barely keeping his monstrous side in check. He fights not just Abomination, but also his growing anger. His inner voice screams, "Don't lose control." Yet the brutality of the fight pushes Hulk closer to the edge. Each blow he lands on Abomination feels less like self-defense and more like an expression of unchecked fury. Betty sees the shift in Hulk's demeanor and grows desperate. She bolts from her vantage point, heading toward the battleground despite her father's protests. "Betty, stop, you'll be killed," Ross shouts, but she doesn't listen. As Betty gets closer, the fight reaches its peak. Hulk lifts Abomination and smashes him into a building, causing debris to rain down on the street. Abomination groans, weakened but still defiant. "You can't stop me," he snarls. Hulk roars in response, grabbing a jagged piece of metal and hurling it like a spear, impaling Abomination through the chest. The villain lets out a guttural cry before collapsing, lifeless. For a moment, there's silence. The civilians who had been hiding peek out from their shelters. General Ross lowers his binoculars, relief washing over his face. But the calm is short-lived. Hulk stands over Abomination's body, his chest heaving. Instead of calming down, his breathing becomes erratic. His muscles twitch, his fists clench, and his glowing green eyes scan the wreckage around him. His humanity is slipping away. Betty finally reaches the scene, standing amidst the rubble. She calls out softly, "Bruce, it's over. You can stop now, please." Hulk turns to face her, but his expression is unrecognizable. The rage has consumed him, and her voice doesn't register. Instead, he sees her as a threat, a fragile figure in a world that has done nothing but provoke his anger. Betty takes a cautious step forward. "It's me, Bruce. It's Betty. You know me." But before she can get any closer, Hulk lets out a deafening roar, shaking the ground beneath her feet. Betty stumbles backward, fear overtaking her. In that instant, Hulk smashes the ground near her, sending a shockwave that topples nearby cars and debris. General Ross watches in horror from the command center, realizing what's happening. "He's gone," he whispers. He orders his men to prepare for an all-out assault. "Deploy everything we've got. We need to stop him before it's too late." Betty's voice becomes faint in Hulk's mind as his rage fully takes hold. He leaps into the air, crashing into a nearby building and sending it crumbling. The people inside barely have time to escape. Hulk's roar echoes through Harlem as the act ends, marking the moment Bruce Banner is lost to the monster. Hulk's rampage through Harlem escalates into a nightmare of destruction. Buildings crumble under his massive fists, cars are tossed into the air like toys, and the streets are left littered with wreckage. Civilians flee in terror, their cries mixing with the sound of collapsing infrastructure. The chaos is overwhelming, and for Bruce Banner, buried deep within the Hulk's subconscious, the remnants of his humanity are slipping away. Betty Ross, bruised but determined, struggles to keep up with the destructive path Hulk has carved through the city. She refuses to give up on Bruce, believing she can reach the man she loves. Meanwhile, General Ross at the Military Command Center watches the devastation with gritted teeth. "We have no choice," he growls. "Bring in the heavy artillery. We take him down now." Swarms of military vehicles pour into Harlem, forming a perimeter around the Hulk. Tanks roll into position, helicopters hover overhead, and soldiers armed with high-caliber weapons take aim. The streets are illuminated by searchlights as the commanding officer gives the order to engage. Hulk roars as the military opens fire. Bullets ricochet off his impenetrable skin, barely phasing him. He charges at the tanks, flipping one onto its side with a single blow, and ripping the turret off another. Helicopters launch missiles, but Hulk leaps into the air, grabbing one by its tail rotor and hurling it into a nearby building. The wreckage explodes in a fiery display, further spreading panic. Betty, caught between the military assault and Hulk's rampage, shouts into the chaos, "Stop shooting, you're only making him angrier." But her voice is drowned out by the deafening sounds of war. Despite the onslaught, Hulk shows no signs of slowing down. His rage intensifies with each attack, and his strength seems limitless. General Ross watches helplessly as his forces are decimated. "We're out of options," he mutters. "Prepare the gamma cannon." The gamma cannon, a top-secret weapon designed to neutralize gamma radiation, is wheeled into position. Scientists warn Ross that it's untested and could have catastrophic consequences, but Ross is desperate. "We have no choice," he snaps. "Fire on my command." As the cannon charges, Betty pushes her way through the chaos, determined to reach Hulk. She dodges debris and military vehicles, her voice hoarse from shouting Bruce's name. When she finally gets close enough, she sees Hulk standing amidst the wreckage, his massive form illuminated by the glow of the cannon's charging energy. "Bruce!" she screams, her voice cracking. For a moment, Hulk freezes. He turns toward her, his glowing green eyes meeting hers. Something flickers in his expression. Recognition, perhaps. Betty takes a cautious step forward. "You can stop this. Come back to me." But before the connection can take hold, a sudden explosion nearby startles Hulk, reigniting his rage. He lets out an earth-shaking roar and slams his fists into the ground, sending a shockwave that knocks Betty off her feet. She lands hard, unconscious. General Ross, watching from his command vehicle, sees his daughter fall. His face hardens with grief and resolve. "Fire the cannon." The gamma cannon fires a massive pulse of green energy, hitting Hulk square in the chest. He roars in agony, collapsing to his knees as the energy destabilizes the gamma radiation within him. For a brief moment, it seems like the weapon is working, but the effect is short-lived. Instead of neutralizing him, the gamma energy fuels Hulk's rage, causing him to grow even larger and more unstable. His roar becomes a deafening bellow as his muscles swell, his veins glowing with an unnatural light. The gamma blast has backfired, turning Hulk into an even more destructive force. General Ross stares in disbelief as his weapon fails. "Dear God," he whispers. Hulk rises to his full height, now more monstrous than ever. He slams his fists together, creating a shockwave that levels the surrounding area. The military is thrown into disarray as soldiers and vehicles are scattered like leaves in a storm. Ross watches helplessly as his forces retreat, unable to withstand Hulk's onslaught. As Hulk disappears into the darkness of the city, leaving behind a trail of devastation, Ross collapses into his seat, his face pale. "We've created a monster we can't stop," he mutters. The destruction Hulk leaves in his wake becomes a haunting reminder of the chaos unleashed when Bruce Banner loses control. As the night wears on, the military withdraws from Harlem, leaving the city in ruins. Fires burn unchecked, and the cries of the injured echo through the empty streets. General Ross orders a no-fly zone over the area, declaring it a quarantine zone. His failure weighs heavily on him, but he refuses to give up. "We're not done yet," he tells his team. "We need every resource at our disposal." Meanwhile, Hulk trudges into the outskirts of the city, his monstrous form illuminated by the moonlight. His heavy breaths create fog in the cool air, and his massive footsteps leave craters in the asphalt. Somewhere deep within, Bruce Banner fights to regain control. Memories flash through his mind. Betty's voice, her face, and the devastation he caused. But these moments are fleeting, drowned out by the overwhelming fury that now defines him. As dawn approaches, Hulk reaches the edge of a dense forest. He retreats into its shadows, seeking solace from the chaos. Animals scatter as he crashes through the underbrush, his rage still simmering. In a clearing, he collapses onto his knees, his breathing heavy. For a moment, the forest is silent. Then Hulk lets out a guttural roar, shaking the ground and sending birds flying into the sky. Back in Harlem, Betty awakens in a makeshift hospital set up by the military. She has a concussion, but insists on speaking to her father. General Ross approaches her bed, his face grim. "You should be resting," he says. Betty glares at him. "Resting? While you turn Bruce into a weapon? While you make everything worse?" She struggles to sit up, her voice filled with anger and grief. "He's not a monster, Dad. You made him into one." Ross doesn't respond immediately. He takes a deep breath and says, "I've made mistakes, but this isn't just about Bruce anymore. He's a danger to everyone. We can't let him go unchecked. Betty shakes her head, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand. If you keep pushing him, you'll only make it worse. I can reach him. I can bring him back. Ross hesitates, torn between his duty and his daughter's plea. Finally, he nods. We'll try it your way, but if it doesn't work, I'm ending this, no matter what. Elsewhere, a team of scientists under Ross's orders works frantically to modify the gamma cannon for a second strike. They believe they can recalibrate the weapon to suppress Hulk's gamma energy instead of amplifying it. However, the lead scientist warns that the process is risky and untested. If we fire this and fail, he says, we may lose any chance of stopping him. As Ross weighs his options, Betty convinced him to let her lead a search team into the forest where Hulk was last seen. Accompanied by a small group of soldiers, she ventures into the wilderness. The tension is palpable as they move deeper into the forest, their flashlights cutting through the early morning mist. They eventually find Hulk sitting in the clearing, his massive form hunched over like a wounded animal. Betty steps forward cautiously, her heart pounding. Bruce, she calls out softly. Hulk lifts his head, his glowing green eyes meeting hers. For a moment, it seems like he recognizes her. Betty takes another step forward, her voice trembling. It's me, Bruce. You can come back. You don't have to do this. The soldiers behind her tense, their weapons trained on Hulk. One of them mutters, "This is a bad idea." Hulk slowly rises to his feet, towering over Betty. His expression is conflicted, as if battling the rage within. Betty reaches out her hand. "Come back to me, Bruce." Just as it seems she might succeed, a twig snaps under the foot of one of the soldiers. The sound startles Hulk, reigniting his fury. He roars and charges forward, scattering the search team. Betty screams as soldiers open fire, their bullets ricocheting off Hulk's skin. The scene descends into chaos as Hulk lashes out, smashing trees and sending soldiers flying. Betty is caught in the crossfire, narrowly avoiding being crushed by a falling tree. General Ross, monitoring the situation from the command center, curses under his breath. "Pull them out," he orders. "Now." As the soldiers retreat, Betty refuses to leave. She calls out to Bruce again, but her voice is drowned out by the sounds of destruction. Finally, a helicopter swoops in and lifts her to safety, leaving Hulk alone in the forest. The act ends with Hulk standing amidst the wreckage of the forest, his breathing heavy. His roar echoes into the distance as the screen fades to black. The forest Hulk had retreated to now lies in ruins, a testament to the uncontrollable rage that had consumed him. Thunderbolt Ross, his face etched with determination, watches the live satellite feed of the destruction. "This ends now," he declares. The gamma cannon, now recalibrated for a second and final strike, is loaded onto a military transport plane. Ross orders his troops to surround the forest, creating a massive containment perimeter. Betty pleads with her father. "Don't do this, Dad. There's still a chance to bring him back." Her voice cracks with desperation, but Ross shakes his head. "He's gone, Betty. Bruce Banner isn't coming back. The longer we wait, the more lives we lose." As the military mobilizes, Hulk, deep in the heart of the forest, senses their approach. His rage bubbles to the surface, and he lets out a deafening roar that shakes the earth. Birds flee, and the remaining wildlife scatters. This is no longer a battle for survival. It is war. The military launches their assault. Tanks roll in, helicopters circle overhead, and ground troops advance cautiously. Hulk meets them head on, his massive fists tearing through vehicles and sending soldiers scattering. Explosions light up the night as rockets and grenades fail to pierce his impenetrable skin. Amidst the chaos, Betty sneaks past the perimeters, determined to reach Bruce before it's too late. She moves through the destruction, calling out his name, but her voice is drowned out by the cacophony of battle. When she finally spots him, he is standing amidst a pile of smoking wreckage, his breathing heavy and his eyes glowing with fury. "Bruce!" she shouts, running toward him. Hulk turns, his massive form looming over her. For a moment, his expression softens. It's as if he recognizes her, but the moment is fleeting. A sudden explosion nearby jolts him back into his rage, and he lets out a roar that forces Betty to cover her ears. Above, the military transport plane carrying the Gamma cannon arrives. General Ross gives the order to fire. The cannon charges, its green energy building to a blinding intensity. Betty sees the plane and realizes what's about to happen. "No!" she screams. "You'll kill him!" Hulk, noticing the plane, leaps into the air with incredible speed. He grabs onto the cannon just as it fires, redirecting the blast toward the ground. The resulting explosion creates a massive shockwave, knocking over trees and vehicles. Soldiers are thrown to the ground and the transport plane spirals out of control. The Gamma blast doesn't weaken Hulk, it fuels him. His muscles swell, and his roars become even more feral. Ross watches in horror as his last weapon fails. "We've made him stronger," he mutters, his voice filled with dread. Betty, undeterred, steps forward. "Bruce, stop!" she cries. "This isn't you! You're not a monster!" Her words seem to reach him, and Hulk hesitates. His glowing eyes dim slightly as he looks at her. "You're stronger than this," she says, tears streaming down her face. "You're my Bruce." For a brief moment, Bruce Banner surfaces. Hulk's massive hands tremble, and his expression softens. "Betty," he murmurs, his voice deep and guttural. But the moment is shattered as the remaining soldiers, unaware of the breakthrough, open fire. Hulk roars in pain and fury, the connection with Betty lost once more. Realizing that she has failed, Betty steps back as Hulk charges at the remaining military forces. He smashes through their ranks, leaving a trail of destruction. General Ross, seeing no other option, orders a full retreat. "We've lost this fight," he admits grimly. As dawn breaks, Hulk stands alone amidst the wreckage. His breathing is heavy, and his body is covered in scorch marks and blood, none of it his own. He looks around at the devastation he has caused, and for a fleeting moment, Bruce's consciousness surfaces. The sight of the destruction fills him with despair, and a single tear rolls down his monstrous face. Hulk lets out one final anguished roar before bounding into the wilderness. He disappears into the mountains, leaving behind a broken city and a grieving Betty. Back at the military command center, General Ross watches the live satellite feed of Hulk's retreat. "He's out there," he says, his voice heavy with regret, "and he'll always be a threat." Betty sits alone in the wreckage of Harlem, clutching a photograph of her and Bruce. Choice C. What if Thanos invaded Earth in 2008? The streets of Harlem are chaos incarnate as the Hulk and Abomination clash in a brutal citywide battle. Buildings crumble under their immense blows, cars are tossed like toys, and terrified civilians flee in every direction. Helicopters circle overhead, broadcasting the destruction live to the world. Among the chaos, General Thunderbolt Ross monitors the battle from a mobile command center. His voice booms over the comms, issuing orders to contain the monsters tearing apart the city. Get the tanks in position, Ross barks, slamming his fist on the table. We need to bring both of them down, now. As the military closes in, the Hulk and Abomination show no signs of stopping. The sheer magnitude of their fight sends shockwaves through the streets, shaking even Ross's command center. In the middle of the chaos, Betty Ross watches from a safe house. Tears stream down her face as she sees the man she loves, Bruce Banner, locked in a savage fight that seems impossible to stop. Suddenly, JARVIS's calm, precise voice interrupts the action. Sir, I've detected an energy signature consistent with gamma radiation. The epicenter appears to be Harlem, New York. Inside his private jet, Tony Stark raises an eyebrow, sipping a glass of scotch. Gamma radiation? Let me guess. Our old friend Bruce? Yes, sir, Jarvis confirms. The battle is escalating. Casualties are imminent. Tony sighs, glancing at a holographic display showing the destruction in Harlem. Guess it's time for some field testing. He presses a button on his wrist, and the jet begins autopiloting toward the city. Tony strides to the back of the jet, where a large, bulky suit of armor stands waiting. It's not pretty, he mutters to himself, inspecting the rough edges of the prototype Hulkbuster armor. But it'll have to do. Back in Harlem, the tide of battle begins to shift. Hulk overpowers Abomination, lifting him off the ground and slamming him into the side of a building. Abomination roars, breaking free and retaliating with a vicious swing that sends Hulk crashing into a row of parked cars. The military seizes the moment, launching a barrage of missiles at both combatants. The explosions briefly separate the two monsters, but fail to do any lasting damage. Ross watches in frustration as the destruction continues. Damn it, these weapons are useless, he growls. Then a new sound fills the air, a high-pitched whine followed by the roar of rocket thrusters. The onlookers shield their eyes as a blinding light streaks across the battlefield. Tony Stark lands in the center of the destruction, encased in his bulky, unfinished Hulkbuster suit. The crowd gasps at the sight of Iron Man. Good evening, Harlem, Tony quips, raising his hands defensively. Sorry I'm late to the party. Who wants to talk about this like adults? Hulk and Abomination both turn their attention to the new arrival. Abomination snarls, leaping toward Iron Man with terrifying speed. Tony braces himself, activating the Hulkbuster's thrusters to dodge the incoming attack. Okay, noted. No talking, he mutters. Hulk, momentarily distracted by Tony's appearance, watches as Iron Man and Abomination clash. Tony's repulsor beams and advanced weaponry keep Abomination at bay, but the sheer brute force of the creature overwhelms the suit's defenses. Sparks fly as Abomination grabs one of Iron Man's arms, ripping it clean off. Jarvis, remind me to add reinforced joints to the to-do list, Tony says, deploying a missile from his shoulder to force Abomination back. Seeing an opportunity, Hulk leaps into the fray. He tackles Abomination, sending both of them crashing into a nearby building. Tony uses the moment to recalibrate his suit, the Hulkbuster system sputtering back to life. As the three-way battle unfolds, the sky above Harlem begins to darken. A low hum reverberates through the city, growing louder with each passing second. Civilians and soldiers alike look up in confusion and fear. A massive alien ship, its design unlike anything Earth has ever seen, emerges from the clouds, casting a foreboding shadow over the battlefield. Inside the sanctuary Seku, Thanos stands with his arms crossed, watching the destruction below. "This planet reeks of chaos," he says, his voice cold and calculating. "The stones are here. Begin the assault." Back on the ground, a massive portal opens, and the Black Order, Proxima Midnight, Corvus Glaive, Ebony Maw, and Cull Obsidian step through, their weapons drawn. The invaders assess the battlefield, their eyes locking onto Hulk and Abomination. Proxima Midnight smirks, raising her spear. Two beasts, let's see which is stronger. Tony Stark inside his suit, staring up at the sky. What the hell is that? The Black Order descends upon Harlem with ruthless precision, dividing the battlefield into pockets of destruction. Civilians scream as Cull Obsidian topples buildings, and Proxima Midnight throws her deadly spear, cutting down military vehicles like paper. Hulk and Abomination, momentarily distracted by the chaos, pause their battle to assess this new threat. Thunderbolt Ross watches in disbelief from his command center. "What the hell is this?" he growls. His aide replies, "Sir, we're picking up extraterrestrial energy signatures. Multiple hostile targets." Extraterrestrial. You're telling me we've got aliens now? Ross slams his fist on the console. Focus all fire on those things before they wipe out the city. Meanwhile, Tony Stark recalibrates his damaged Hulkbuster suit, running diagnostics as he surveys the chaos. "Jarvis, tell me what I'm looking at." Analysis suggests multiple advanced extraterrestrial entities. Their leader appears to be significantly more powerful than the others. Tony's HUD zooms in on Thanos, who calmly observes the carnage with his hands behind his back. Great. Big purple guy with a god complex. Just my luck, Tony mutters. On the battlefield, Hulk charges at Cull Obsidian, roaring with fury. The two giants clash in a thunderous display of brute strength, each blow shaking the ground. Abomination, not to be outdone, targets Proxima Midnight, hurling debris at her with terrifying force. She nimbly dodges his attacks, retaliating with her spear, which leaves deep gashes in Abomination's thick hide. Tony activates his thrusters, launching himself into the fray. He fires a salvo of missiles at Ebony Maw, who effortlessly deflects them with a wave of his hand. "Your primitive toys are no match for the Great Maw," Ebony taunts, using his telekinesis to hurl debris back at Tony. "Yeah, well, your face isn't winning any beauty contests," Tony quips, dodging the attack. He counters with a focused repulsor blast, managing to push Maw back a few steps. Amidst the chaos, Thanos strides toward the center of the battlefield, unbothered by the destruction around him. He raises his hand, summoning a small but deadly burst of energy that incapacitates a nearby tank. The soldiers surrounding him scatter, their weapons useless against his overwhelming power. Hulk, after delivering a crushing blow to Cull Obsidian, turns his attention to Thanos. With a mighty leap, he lands directly in front of the Mad Titan, roaring in defiance. Thanos smirks. Impressive, he says, but ultimately futile. The two titans clash in an epic display of strength and savagery. Hulk throws a series of devastating punches, but Thanos blocks each one with calculated precision. Thanos counters with a single punch to Hulk's chest, sending him flying into a nearby building. The impact leaves Hulk stunned, struggling to regain his footing. Tony, witnessing the fight, flies over to assist. "All right, big guy, let's take him down together," he says, targeting Thanos with his repulsors. The combined assault of Hulk and Iron Man seems to gain ground, but Thanos quickly adapts. With a sweeping motion, he knocks Tony out of the sky and delivers a crushing kick to Hulk, pinning him to the ground. "Your strength is admirable," Thanos says, leaning over the defeated Hulk. "But strength alone will not save your world. Just as Thanos prepares to deliver the finishing blow, Abomination charges in, tackling him with all his might. The two tumble across the battlefield, their massive forms carving a path of destruction. This momentary distraction gives Tony and Hulk a chance to regroup. "Okay, I'm officially out of my depth," Tony says, his suit sparking from damage. "Any brilliant ideas, big guy?" Hulk roars in response, charging back into the fray. Tony follows, using his suit's remaining weapons to support the attack. The three-way battle between Hulk, Abomination, and Thanos rages on, with the Black Order continuing their assault on the city. Meanwhile, Thunderbolt Ross orders his forces to fall back, realizing they are no match for the invaders. "We need reinforcements. Call the Pentagon. Hell, call the Avengers," he shouts. As night falls, the battlefield is illuminated by fires and explosions. Harlem is unrecognizable, reduced to a smoldering wasteland. The act ends with Thanos standing amidst the chaos, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "The stones are here," he says, his voice calm and menacing, "and I will have them." The battle for Harlem reaches new levels of devastation as Thanos' forces tighten their grip. The Black Order splits into groups, each carrying out calculated strikes to locate the Infinity Stones. Ebony Maw leads a contingent toward the SHIELD command post to extract any intelligence on Earth's hidden relics. Cull Obsidian and Proxima Midnight rampage through the city, overwhelming the scattered resistance. Hulk and Abomination, their temporary truce forged in desperation, focus on taking down Cull Obsidian. The two powerhouses unleash a flurry of attacks, with Abomination using his brute strength to pin Cull while Hulk delivers earth-shattering punches. Despite their combined might, Cull proves to be a formidable opponent, using his massive weapon to keep them at bay. The fight spirals through the ruins of a school, leaving the building in ruins. Meanwhile, Tony Stark limps through the battlefield, his damaged suit sparking with each step. "Jarvis, tell me we've got something left in the tank," he says, his voice strained. "Minimal energy reserves, sir," Jarvis replies. "But I have recalibrated the suit's remaining resources for optimal efficiency." "Good. Let's make it count," Tony says, targeting Proxima Midnight, who is wreaking havoc on nearby civilians. He fires a concentrated repulsor blast, catching her off guard and sending her crashing into a collapsed building. "You dare strike me, mortal," Proxima growls, emerging from the rubble. She hurls her spear at Tony, who barely evades it, the weapon grazing his suit and slicing through his shoulder. "Yeah, that's gonna leave a mark," Tony mutters, launching a counterattack. He uses the environment to his advantage, collapsing scaffolding and debris onto Proxima. Though temporarily incapacitated, she is far from defeated. Thunderbolt Ross's desperate call for reinforcements is answered when SHIELD Quinjets swoop into the fray. Maria Hill leads the strike team, coordinating attacks against the Black Order. "Focus on containment," she commands through her headset. "We need to give the big guns room to breathe." The Quinjets provide cover fire as Hulk and Abomination overpower Cull Obsidian. Hulk grabs a massive streetlight, swinging it like a club, while Abomination lands a devastating blow to Cull's head, finally bringing him down. As Cull falls, Hulk and Abomination share a brief moment of recognition before their alliance fractures. The two begin to square off, their mutual hatred reigniting now that the immediate threat is neutralized. "Hey, green guys," Tony shouts, flying between them. "How about we save the bromance brawl for after we deal with the guy trying to end the world?" Hulk growls, but backs off, his rage redirected toward the greater threat. While his forces wreak havoc, Thanos methodically searches for the stones. His attention is drawn to a faint energy signal detected by Ebony Maw. This planet holds secrets, Moss says, kneeling before Thanos. One of great power lies buried here. Thanos' gaze narrows. Then we must unearth it. As Thanos approaches the battle, the air grows heavy with dread. Civilians flee, their terror palpable. Hulk roars and charges at him, launching a furious assault. Thanos meets him head-on, effortlessly blocking and countering each blow. The Mad Titan's sheer power and combat skill overwhelm Hulk, who is thrown through a series of crumbling buildings. Tony engages Thanos next, firing every weapon his suit has left. Missiles, lasers, and repulsor blasts rain down, but Thanos' energy shield deflects them all. Your technology is impressive, Thanos says, stepping closer. But it pales in comparison to the power of the cosmos. Thanos hurls a piece of debris at Tony, knocking him out of the sky. Tony crashes hard, his suit nearly disintegrated. Struggling to stand, he quips, "Not bad for a guy who skipped a leg day." Abomination, seizing the opportunity, leaps at Thanos from behind, landing a powerful blow that briefly staggers him. Thanos turns, unimpressed. With a single punch, he sends Abomination flying, leaving a massive crater in his wake. Hulk returns to the fight, his fury renewed. He delivers a series of bone-crushing blows, managing to momentarily push Thanos back. The tide seems to turn when SHIELD's reinforcements join the fight, their firepower creating a distraction. Maria Hill coordinates an airstrike targeting Thanos with precision-guided missiles. The explosions engulf the Mad Titan, shrouding him in smoke. As the dust settles, Hulk, Tony, and the SHIELD forces regroup. Thanos emerges from the smoke unscathed, but visibly annoyed. "This defiance is tiresome," he says, raising his hand. A surge of energy erupts from his palm, obliterating the surrounding area. Hulk shields Tony from the blast, taking the brunt of the impact. The green behemoth staggers but refuses to fall. Tony, his suit sparking and barely functional, says, "We're gonna need a bigger plan." Thanos prepares to deliver the final blow, but a sudden explosion rocks the battlefield. Out of the smoke emerges a new player, a Wakandan aircraft piloted by Shuri. "Need a hand," she says over the comms, deploying advanced weapons to assist. Thanos momentarily retreating, his interest piqued by the defiance of Earth's heroes. "This planet is more resilient than I expected," he muses, "but resilience won't save them." Thanos, standing tall and imposing, surveys the chaos. His Black Order regroups at his command, their ferocity undiminished despite the losses. Meanwhile, Tony Stark, Bruce Banner as Hulk, and the SHIELD forces rally for one last desperate stand. Shuri's Wakandan ship hovers overhead, providing tactical support. Thanos steps forward, addressing the battered heroes. This world clings to its defiance, yet it cannot escape its fate. Bring me the stones or witness its end. Hulk roars in response, charging directly at Thanos. The ground shakes with each of his massive strides. Their clash is titanic. Hulk unleashes a flurry of powerful punches, each one shaking the battlefield. Thanos absorbs the hits with grim determination, using his superior technique to counterstrike. A brutal uppercut sends Hulk crashing into a crumbling building. Shuri's ship provides cover fire, its advanced weaponry keeping the Black Order at bay. Proxima Midnight and Corvus Glaive counterattack, leaping into the air to engage the Wakandan ship. Shuri maneuvers skillfully, firing precision blasts that keep them at a distance, but Proxima manages to latch onto the craft's hull, plunging her spear into its engines. Inside the cockpit, Shuri grimaces. "This is why I need vibranium cloaking on everything," she mutters, activating the ship's defensive shields, sending Proxima tumbling. Tony, still wearing the remnants of his suit, uses a jury-rigged energy cannon to target Thanos. "Hey, big guy, you're not the only one who can accessorize," he quips, firing a concentrated beam of energy. The blast lands squarely on Thanos' chest, forcing him back a few steps. "You are resourceful, Stark," Thanos says, brushing off the attack. "But all the intellect in the universe cannot escape inevitability." As the fight rages on, Hulk recovers and re-enters the battle. He teams up with Abomination once again to fight Cull Obsidian, the two unlikely allies coordinating their attacks with surprising effectiveness. Hulk lands a devastating blow to Cull's head, while Abomination uses his brute strength to hurl him into a collapsing structure. Meanwhile, Tony devises a desperate plan. He contacts Shuri via comms. "We need to get that ship operational and fast. Thanos' forces won't hold back." "I'm on it," Shuri replies, diverting power to stabilize the engines. Tony then turns to Maria Hill. "Coordinate the remaining SHIELD forces. Create a diversion to buy us time." As Hill directs the agents, Thanos begins to sense their strategy. He dispatches Ebony Maw to locate the Infinity Stones, suspecting Earth's heroes are hiding them. Maw confronts Shuri's ship, his telekinetic powers creating a shield against its weaponry. Shuri engages in a one-on-one battle, using her tech to outmaneuver him. Hulk, bruised and battered, finally brings Thanos to his knees with a relentless assault. However, just as he prepares to land the finishing blow, Thanos uses his massive strength to grab Hulk's arms and slam him into the ground. The impact creates a crater, leaving Hulk momentarily incapacitated. Tony confronts Thanos, his energy cannon sparking. "You're not walking away from this," he declares. Thanos smirks. "I never intended to." The two engage in a fierce battle. Despite Tony's ingenuity, Thanos' sheer power overwhelms him. Just as Thanos is about to deliver a fatal blow, a blast from Shuri's repaired ship forces him to retreat. The heroes regroup, but their numbers and resources dwindle. Realizing they cannot defeat Thanos through brute force alone, Tony devises a risky gambit. He and Shuri collaborate to overload the ship's core, creating a massive energy burst aimed at incapacitating Thanos and his forces. "This isn't a win-win scenario," Tony admits, "but if we don't stop him here, Earth's done." Hulk, barely standing, agrees to hold off Thanos while the others execute the plan. "You built the tech, Stark. Now let me smash." The final moments are a whirlwind of action. Hulk faces Thanos one last time, their clash echoing through the city. Shuri pilots the ship into position, directing all its remaining energy into a concentrated blast. Tony coordinates with S.H.I.E.L.D., ensuring the evacuation of civilians caught in the crossfire. As the energy surge builds, Tony and Shuri unleash the blast, engulfing Thanos and the Black Order in a brilliant explosion. When the light fades, Thanos is gone, but the cost of victory is evident. Harlem lies in ruins, a grim reminder of the battle's toll. S.H.I.E.L.D. begins cleanup operations, while Shuri surveys the wreckage of her ship. Hulk, reverting to Bruce Banner, collapses from exhaustion, his body covered in scars. Tony, battered but alive, reflects on the chaos. "We're gonna need a bigger team," he says to Maria Hill. Shuri approaches Tony. "Your tech held up better than expected. Maybe Wakanda could help." "Not the worst idea I've heard today," Tony replies. Choice D. What if Hydra captured Hulk and Abomination? The city of Harlem shook with chaos as the Hulk and Abomination clashed in a battle of titanic proportions. Buildings crumbled under their blows, and terrified civilians fled the scene. Bruce Banner, lost in the primal rage of the Hulk, traded devastating punches with Emil Blonsky, who had fully transformed into the monstrous Abomination. Their battle created a storm of destruction, attracting the attention of not just the military, but an even darker force lurking in the shadows: Hydra. Within a cloaked shield helicarrier, Hydra operatives monitored the mayhem. Arnim Zola's digital avatar, displayed on a nearby screen, coordinated the mission with precision. "Deploy Winter Soldier," Zola commanded. "The time has come to secure our assets." Thunderbolt Ross, determined to end the chaos, mobilized the military. Tanks and Humvees rolled into Harlem, opening fire on both monsters, but their weapons barely phased the two giants. Betty Ross, witnessing the destruction from a nearby safe zone, defied her father's orders and ran toward the battlefield. "Bruce, you have to stop this," she screamed, hoping her voice could reach him. Hulk momentarily hesitated, his green eyes locking onto Betty. For a fleeting second, Bruce Banner's consciousness fought its way to the surface, but Abomination took advantage of the distraction, delivering a thunderous blow that sent Hulk crashing into a nearby building. Betty rushed to him, tears streaming down her face as she knelt beside his battered form. Meanwhile, Hydra's strike team, led by the Winter Soldier, moved into position. Hidden among Ross's forces, they awaited the perfect moment to strike. The Winter Soldier, clad in tactical armor and armed with high-tech weaponry, kept his gaze fixed on his, target. His orders were clear: secure both Hulk and Abomination, eliminate any obstacles, and leave no witnesses. Hulk roared back into the fight, pushing himself to his feet. His massive fists collided with Abomination's, sending shockwaves through the city. Just as it seemed Hulk might gain the upper hand, a single, precise shot echoed through the chaos. Betty Ross gasped, clutching her chest as a sniper's bullet struck her. She collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Hulk's roar of fury shook the streets as he turned to see Betty's motionless body. Thunderbolt Ross, horrified by the scene, ordered his men to stand down, but it was too late. Hydra's forces, disguised among the military, revealed themselves. Smoke grenades and gamma suppressors were launched, blanketing the battlefield. Winter Soldier moved swiftly, targeting Hulk with a specialized device that emitted a high-frequency pulse designed to disorient gamma-powered beings. Hulk charged at him, but the soldier's agility and precision kept him one step ahead. Meanwhile, Hydra operatives subdued Abomination with tranquilizers and restraints, securing their first prize. Thunderbolt Ross, enraged and desperate, tried to regain control of the situation. He barked orders into his radio, but a shadow loomed behind him. Winter Soldier struck without hesitation, driving a knife into Ross's back. The general fell to his knees, his blood pooling on the ground as Hydra solidified its grip on the battlefield. The military, caught off guard and outmaneuvered, retreated. Hulk, weakened by the gamma suppressors and his grief over Betty's death, fought with dwindling strength. Winter Soldier delivered a brutal series of blows, culminating in a final strike that brought Hulk to his knees. Hydra's agents swarmed him, injecting him with a powerful sedative. As the chaos subsided, Hydra operatives loaded the unconscious Hulk and restrained Abomination onto transport vehicles. The Winter Soldier stood silently, his gaze lingering on Betty's lifeless form. Somewhere deep within him, a flicker of doubt stirred, but Zola's voice in his earpiece drowned it out. Mission accomplished. Return to base. The covert Hydra facility was a fortress hidden deep within the Siberian wilderness, its cold steel walls reinforced to contain even the most powerful of captives. Bruce Banner, restrained in a high-tech containment pod, slowly regained consciousness. His muscles ached, his mind was foggy, and his heart was heavy with the haunting image of Betty's lifeless body. Across the room, Emil Blonsky, still in his Abomination form, lay heavily sedated in an adjacent pod, his grotesque frame restrained by thick, unyielding chains. Arnim Zola's voice echoed through the chamber, emanating from multiple screens that lined the walls. Dr. Banner, the digital specter, greeted with calculated politeness. "Welcome to your new home. You and Mr. Blonsky are essential to Hydra's future. Your unique physiology will pave the way for the next generation of super soldiers." Bruce strained against his restraints. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he growled. "You can't control this." Zola's face flickered into a sinister smile. "Control is irrelevant. What matters is power." In a separate chamber, the Winter Soldier was receiving new orders. Zola's algorithms reinforced his loyalty, suppressing any flickers of doubt. The soldier's next task: eliminate any threats to Hydra's operation and ensure the success of their experiments. His mind flashed briefly to the battlefield, to Betty's death, but Zola's voice drowned out the memory with cold, calculated directives. Meanwhile, Hydra scientists began extracting samples of gamma-infused blood from both Banner and Blonsky. Bruce, horrified, watched as the scientists replicated his genetic material and tested it on lab-grown subjects. Many experiments failed, resulting in grotesque and unstable creatures. But Zola was patient, refining his process with each iteration. In another part of the facility, Blonsky awoke, his anger barely contained by his restraints. "Let me out of here," he bellowed, his voice reverberating through the walls. Unlike Bruce, Blonsky was cooperative, if only to further his own goals. Zola offered him an enticing deal: enhanced power in exchange for his loyalty to Hydra. Blonsky grinned. "Give me what I want and I'll tear down anyone who gets in your way." Zola's scientists modified Blonsky's physiology, amplifying his strength and aggression. The result was a more dangerous and uncontrollable abomination, one eager to unleash havoc. Bruce, watching the transformation from his containment pod, knew he had to act before it was too late. As days turned into weeks, Bruce used his intellect to subtly sabotage Hydra's experiments. He communicated with his inner Hulk, who shared his rage and grief, vowing to fight back when the time was right. Bruce also began to notice the cracks in the Winter Soldier's facade. During a brief encounter in the lab, Bruce whispered, "They're using you just like they're using me." For a moment, the soldier's cold blue eyes flickered with something resembling recognition, but he remained silent. Zola, sensing Bruce's defiance, ordered the Winter Soldier to increase security and personally oversee the experiments. Bruce, desperate, formulated a plan. Using his intellect, he devised a way to overload the containment systems by subtly manipulating the facility's power grid. It was a dangerous gambit, but he knew it was the only chance to escape and destroy Hydra's plans. The facility's alarms blared as Bruce's sabotage triggered a cascading power failure. Security systems faltered, and the pods restraining both Bruce and Blonsky began to malfunction. Hydra agents scrambled to contain the chaos as Bruce transformed into the Hulk, his rage reignited by the memories of Betty's death and Ross's betrayal. Blonsky, now fully transformed into his enhanced Abomination state, broke free of his restraints with a roar. He turned on the Hydra scientists, crushing them under his massive fists. But rather than joining Bruce in the fight against their captors, Blonsky's thirst for power drove him to seek revenge on the Hulk. The two Gamma Titans clashed once again, this time within the claustrophobic confines of Hydra's facility. Their battle caused massive destruction, ripping through the reinforced walls and sending sparks flying as equipment exploded. Zola, watching the chaos unfold from his screens, began transferring his consciousness to an external system, ensuring Hydra's survival even if the facility was lost. As the fight raged on, Bruce noticed the Winter Soldier observing from a distance. His expression conflicted. Bruce called out to him, "You're not a killer. They made you one. Fight them, not me." For a moment, it seemed as if the soldier might listen, but then Hydra reinforcements arrived, forcing Bruce to focus on survival. The Hulk, battered but determined, used the confusion to his advantage. He tore through the facility's structural supports, causing it to collapse around them. The Winter Soldier retreated, his loyalty to Hydra shaken but not broken. As the rubble began to fall, Bruce made his way to the surface, vowing to stop Hydra's experiments and end their reign of terror. The Hydra facility lay in ruins, its steel and concrete walls twisted and broken, yet the heart of Hydra's operations remained intact. Hulk had escaped to the wilderness, his enormous green figure casting a shadow over the Siberian snow. But Hydra was relentless. Arnim Zola's calculated plans adapted swiftly, ensuring Hydra's survival despite the setback. Deep within the woods, Bruce Banner fought to calm the raging beast within. Exhausted and consumed by guilt, he replayed Betty's death in his mind, the image driving his resolve. "I have to stop them," he muttered to himself. He began constructing a rudimentary shelter, scavenging for supplies in the surrounding area, while formulating a plan to strike back. Banner knew he couldn't take Hydra down alone, not without a team or reinforcements. Meanwhile, Hydra's operations escalated. Zola's focus shifted to weaponizing the enhanced Abomination. Blonsky, now more feral and dangerous, willingly embraced his role as Hydra's ultimate weapon. As part of Zola's plan, Blonsky was unleashed on nearby villages, destroying them in demonstrations of Hydra's power. The destruction served two purposes: to spread fear and to lure the Hulk out of hiding. In the shadows, the Winter Soldier remained conflicted. Bucky Barnes's fractured memories surfaced sporadically, triggered by the chaos around him. Each encounter with Bruce had chipped away at the programming that kept him under Hydra's control. Watching innocent villagers fall victim to Blonsky's rampage awakened a dormant sense of justice within him. Yet Zola's grip on his mind was strong, and Bucky wrestled with his loyalty. As news of Blonsky's attacks spread, Bruce found himself drawn toward the carnage. Each destroyed village was a reminder of the stakes. Hydra was building an unstoppable force. Bruce encountered survivors who told tales of the monstrous soldier who had devastated their homes. Among them was a child, injured but alive, who reminded Bruce of the humanity he was fighting for. The encounter steeled his resolve. "They have to be stopped," he said, his fist clenched. Returning to the Hydra facility, Zola prepared for the next phase of his plan. He deployed a strike team to locate the Hulk, knowing that Blonsky alone might not be enough. At the same time, Zola experimented with new gamma-based enhancements, aiming to create an army of super soldiers. The first few attempts failed, resulting in unstable creatures that turned on their creators. But Zola's confidence was unshaken. "Every failure brings us closer to perfection," he said, his digital voice echoing through the lab. As Bruce approached the remnants of Hydra's base, he encountered the Winter Soldier. Their confrontation was tense. Bruce tried reasoning with him. "You don't have to do this. You're more than their puppet." Bucky's silence was deafening, his face a mask of conflict. The two engaged in a brutal fight, with Bruce holding back the Hulk to avoid killing Bucky. Bucky's precision and skill were formidable, but Bruce's desperation and ingenuity kept him alive. Their fight was interrupted by the arrival of Hydra forces, sent to capture Bruce. Bucky hesitated as Hydra agents surrounded them, their guns trained on Bruce. For a moment, it seemed he would rejoin his masters, but then something shifted. Memories of his time with Steve Rogers, of friendship and loyalty, broke through the fog of Hydra's control. Bucky turned on the agents, dispatching them with ruthless efficiency. Now united by necessity, Bruce and Bucky formed an uneasy alliance. Bruce shared his plan to infiltrate the remaining Hydra facilities and destroy Zola's experiments. Bucky, still grappling with his identity, agreed, if only to atone for his role in Hydra's reign of terror. Together they began their assault, using a combination of strategy and raw power to dismantle Hydra's operations. The climax of the act saw Bruce, in his Hulk form, clashing with Blonsky once again. Their fight was cataclysmic, with Bucky providing support from the sidelines. Blonsky's enhanced abilities made him more formidable than ever, but Hulk's rage was unparalleled. Their battle tore through the facility, leaving destruction in their wake. However, Blonsky's unrelenting strength forced Hulk into a desperate position. As the fight reached its peak, Zola activated a failsafe. The facility's reactors began to overload, threatening to obliterate everything in a massive explosion. Bruce, realizing the danger, forced himself to push past his limits. With Bucky's help, he managed to pin Blonsky under collapsing debris, incapacitating him temporarily. But the victory came at a cost. The explosion was imminent, and their escape would be perilous. The facility's alarms blared as the countdown to the reactor's overload approached its final seconds. Hulk, battered and bruised, stood over the unconscious Blonsky, his massive chest heaving with each breath. Bruce fought internally, struggling to suppress the beast while strategizing their escape. Bucky Barnes, still reeling from his decision to betray Hydra, scanned the area for a way out. "Bruce," Bucky called, his voice sharp over the chaos. "If we don't move now, this place is gonna take us with it." Bruce turned, his green eyes flickering between rage and humanity. "We can't leave Blonsky here. Hydra will just recover him and continue their work." "We don't have time to play hero," Bucky snapped, his tone conflicted. "If we die, no one's left to stop them." Bruce hesitated but relented, hoisting Blonsky over his shoulder. As they navigated the collapsing facility, Hydra soldiers swarmed the corridors. Bucky moved with precision, dispatching enemies with cold efficiency. Hulk's thunderous roars echoed as he barreled through walls and enemies alike, clearing their path. But Hydra had anticipated their moves. In the control room, Arnim Zola observed their progress, his digital visage calculating every outcome. "Deploy the reinforcements," Zola commanded, his voice devoid of emotion. "Ensure they do not escape." The next wave of Hydra operatives was different. Enhanced soldiers, prototypes of Zola's gamma-infused super soldiers. Their mutated forms were grotesque, yet formidable, a grim testament to Hydra's advancements. They attacked with ferocity, overwhelming Hulk and Bucky. Even in his enraged state, Hulk struggled to fend them off. Bucky fought valiantly but was eventually subdued, a Gamma soldier pinning him to the ground. Hulk, enraged at seeing his ally in peril, unleashed a devastating roar, momentarily scattering the soldiers. However, the distraction allowed Hydra to deploy their ace, a specialized containment unit designed to neutralize gamma radiation. The device fired a concentrated beam at Hulk, causing him to stagger. Bruce's control wavered, and the transformation faltered. Seizing the opportunity, Hydra operatives encased the Hulk in a reinforced cage, its walls glowing with an energy that suppressed his strength. Bucky, incapacitated and surrounded, could only watch as Hydra reclaimed their prize. Zola's image flickered onto a nearby screen. "You should be honored, Dr. Banner," he said, his voice dripping with synthetic mockery. "Your sacrifice will fuel the future of Hydra's reign." Bruce, now fully transformed back into his human form, glared at the screen. "You won't get away with this. Someone will stop you." Zola's expressionless face tilted, as if amused. Perhaps, but by then, it will already be too late. Meanwhile, Blonsky regained consciousness, his monstrous form restrained, but his loyalty to Hydra unshaken. Zola ordered his extraction, planning to use both Banner and Blonsky to perfect Hydra's new generation of weapons. As the soldiers dragged them away, Bruce locked eyes with Bucky, a silent plea passing between them. Bucky, still restrained, struggled against his captors. He knew escaping was impossible now, but his mind raced with ways to regroup and fight back. Hydra had won this battle, but he resolved it would not be the end. The reactor, moments from critical overload, erupted in a controlled detonation. The blast obliterated the facility's outer layers, but the core operations had already been moved to a secure underground bunker. Hydra's foresight ensured their victory was not only intact, but expanded. The world above was left to believe the threat had been neutralized, while Hydra continued its work in secret. Far away, in a hidden Hydra base, Zola's digital presence oversaw the next phase of their plans. Bruce and Blonsky were locked in separate chambers, their fates tied to Hydra's ambitions. Bucky was transferred to another facility for reprogramming, his defiance noted but deemed a minor obstacle. Hydra's flag rose higher than ever, their influence spreading unseen. The Avengers would not form in this timeline. Without Bruce Banner, the Hulk, or even a fractured alliance of heroes, the world stood defenseless against Hydra's quiet domination. And in the shadows, Arnim Zola prepared for Hydra's ultimate ascension.